Marxism offers a unique way of looking at international relations. It's like that friend who always points out the power dynamics in every situation. It focuses on economics and class. It argues that capitalism, with its drive for profit, shapes global politics. Marxism believes in class struggle. The haves, the bourgeoisie, own the means of production. The have-nots, the proletariat, work for them. This creates tension and conflict, both within and between countries. Think about multinational corporations. They're powerful actors on the world stage. Marxists argue they prioritize profits over people, often exploiting workers in developing countries. In essence, Marxism helps us see how economic forces drive global power dynamics, often at the expense of the less powerful. Imagine the world as one big capitalist system. That's what Immanuel Wallerstein, a sociologist, argued. He called it the world system theory. In this system, we have core, semi-periphery, and periphery countries. Core countries are the wealthy ones, like the United States. They control global markets and benefit the most from the system. Semi-periphery countries are in the middle. They manufacture goods and provide some services. Periphery countries are the poorest. They supply raw materials and cheap labor. This system, according to Wallerstein, perpetuates global inequality. The rich get richer, and the poor often remain stuck. Think about sweatshops in Bangladesh making clothes for Western brands. That's the world system in action. Imperialism is like capitalism's sidekick, always lurking in the background. It's about powerful countries exploiting weaker ones for their resources and labor. Vladimir Lenin, a famous Marxist, argued that imperialism is a natural stage of capitalism. As capitalist economies grow, they need new markets and resources. So they expand their influence, often through force or coercion. Today, we talk about neo-imperialism. It's subtler, but still about economic dominance. Think about how some Western countries exert control through loans, trade agreements, and military interventions. The legacy of imperialism and its modern forms are still felt today, contributing to global inequality and conflict. Marxism throws some serious shade at traditional international relations theories like realism and liberalism. It's like the rebellious student questioning the status quo. Realism focuses on states as the main actors, always vying for power. It often sees conflict as inevitable. Marxists argue that realism ignores the role of class and economic structures in shaping state behavior. Liberalism is more optimistic. It emphasizes cooperation, international institutions, and free trade. But Marxists argue that liberalism ultimately serves the interests of the capitalist class, often at the expense of the working class and developing countries. So, while realism and liberalism have their merits, Marxism offers a critical lens, urging us to look beyond the surface and examine the underlying economic forces at play. Section 5. Inequality, a global divide. Marxism's focus on inequality is more relevant than ever. The gap between the rich and the poor is staggering. Think about it. The richest 1% of the world's population owns more than half of the world's wealth. That's bananas. Marxists argue that capitalism, with its emphasis on profit maximization, inherently creates and exacerbates inequality. It's like a game rigged in favor of the already wealthy. This inequality isn't just a moral issue, it's a recipe for instability. It can lead to social unrest, conflict, and mass migration. Section 6. Climate change. A capitalist consequence? Even climate change, according to some, is viewed through a Marxist lens. They argue that capitalism, with its relentless pursuit of growth, is a major driver of environmental degradation. Think about fossil fuel companies. They've profited for decades while knowing the environmental consequences of their actions. Marxists argue that this demonstrates how capitalism prioritizes short-term profits over long-term sustainability. They also point out that the effects of climate change are not felt equally. Poorer countries, often the least responsible for emissions, are often hit the hardest by climate-related disasters. Section 7. Labor exploitation, the human cost. Marxism has always been concerned with labor exploitation. And guess what? It's still a major issue today. Think about sweatshops, child labor, and unsafe working conditions. These practices are often driven by the desire to produce goods as cheaply as possible, maximizing profits for corporations. Marxists argue that globalization has intensified labor exploitation. Companies can move their operations to countries with weaker labor laws and lower wages. This creates a race to the bottom, where workers are increasingly vulnerable. The fight for workers' rights, fair wages, and safe working conditions is a key part of the Marxist struggle for a more just world. Section 8. The enduring relevance of Marxist thought. Some might say Marxism is outdated, a relic of the past, but hold on a minute. It's more relevant than ever, especially when we look at global issues. Marxism provides a critical lens for understanding how economic power shapes global politics. It helps us see the systemic nature of inequality, exploitation, and conflict. It reminds us that the world isn't fair and that the pursuit of profit often comes at a human cost. And it encourages us to question the status quo and fight for a more just and equitable world. Section 9. A call for change towards a more just world. Marxism isn't just about complaining about capitalism. It's about creating a more just and equitable world. It calls for a radical transformation of the current economic and political order. This means challenging the power of corporations, advocating for workers' rights, and promoting global solidarity. It means building a system that prioritizes people and the planet over profit. It won't be easy. But by understanding the dynamics of global capitalism and challenging the status quo, we can work toward a future where everyone has a chance to thrive.